It's an experience every working Canadian has suffered, the agony of a job application, the forms to fill out, the questions to answer about education and experience. Now, some companies have added new pain to the process, the honesty test. For the employer, it's a way to screen out undesirables. So, what's wrong with that? Well, plenty of you talk to someone who's failed. Here's the National's Jennifer Scott with Truth and Consequences.
I did not have sexual relations with that woman.
Of the GST, surviving the next elections are no better than the odds of the Mulroney government being re-elected.
Yes or no? Do you believe nicotine is not addictive?
I believe nicotine is not addictive.
I believe that nicotine is not addictive.
Mr. McKinley phoned to confirm your meeting tomorrow.
Strep throat. No, some kind of virus. What's going around?
Asian flu?
Good one.
So what was the purpose of the lie? Were you trying to spare somebody's feelings?
Yeah, I wanted to spare her feelings, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, the way she was dressed and the way her makeup was and all that, so...
Oh,
it
I
wasn't,
see.
yeah.
So you...
That's what I like. She asked, how do I look? And I says, fine, which was a lie.
What kind of jobs have you held?
Bartending and fashion.
Bartending and fashion?
Yeah.
So did you ever take a beer from work or...
I don't consider that taking. I'm drinking.
I worked at another place, and I'd come home and I'd find stick-it pads and pens in my pockets, and I'd be like, oh, okay, well, I feel bad, but I mean, it's not that big a deal.
Honesty, a refusal to lie, steal, or deceive in any way, a fairness and straightforwardness of conduct. Let's face it, honesty is really a subjective term. Your definition may vary from mine. But no matter how you define it, polls show that people seem to think there's less of it around these days, in the home, in politics, and in the workplace. Enter the honesty test. It enables employers to screen out job applicants who are potential liars and thieves. As a job applicant, you're asked to do nothing less than sit down with pencil and paper and lay your conscience bare.
It said on it to tell the truth, so I felt if I tell the truth, I'm going to do fine on this. I didn't realize that this was a test. I didn't realize that this was going to make or break whether I got the job.
Trina Benedict considers herself to be an honest person. Married, mother of 2 boys. She says the biggest lie she's ever told is telling her kids the needle won't hurt at the doctor's.
I try to live an honest life, and I feel pretty good morals and beliefs.
A little more than a year ago, Trina decided to take time off work to be with her kids. She was told she could have her old job back any time. She'd worked there since she was a teenager, in the bakery department at Sobeys, the biggest grocery store chain in the Maritimes.
I take a lot of pride in my work. I matured a lot over the years because Sobeys was my very first job. I started there when I was 17. And it went from working, looking at the clock, you know, wait until payday sort of thing, to actually realizing that when I do a good job, it's noticed.
When she reapplied, there was a new store policy. She had to take an honesty test. There are many versions out there. Here's a sample of some of the questions. There are obvious ones like, have you ever lied? Have you ever stolen from the workplace? Then there are those that test your loyalty. If a colleague was stealing from the company, would you report them? Do you think bosses get away with stealing more easily than employees do? And some questions seem right out of left field. Do you take risks? Do you drive above the speed limit? Do you litter?
Really, they're hypothetical questions. It's hypothetical situations that you're answering. What answer you give and what answer you might actually follow through with if you're in that position are 2 different things.
Have you ever been tempted to steal, was another question.
Yes, I worked in a bakery. I worked in a bakery.
So you said yes.
Yes. And
but you're talking, what, cookies? Stealing cookies?
Warm cookies coming out of the oven, cupcakes, pinwheels, all that good stuff.
But did you ever act on that temptation?
No.
So you answered no to that?
Right. So I told the truth in saying, yes, I was tempted. And I also told the truth in saying, no, I've never acted on it.
Have you never stolen from the workplace?
No.
Never?
No.
Did you want a cookie?
Despite a flawless work record, Trina never was hired back. Her test results showed a tendency towards stealing.
It makes me sort of angry when I have a large company telling me that, you didn't do well on this integrity test. So therefore I'm thinking, okay, well, you're basically telling me I'm not a very moral person. I'm a mother, and I take that to heart.
The honesty test may sound like a drastic way to weed out potential thieves, but companies justify it by pointing to the huge problem of employee theft. Canadian retailers lose a staggering $1.4 million a day to the pockets of their own staff. Deanne Brisebois is head of the Retail Council of Canada.
Well, if you have a dishonest employee, you have a big problem because that employee's in your store, knows how the security functions, knows if tags need to be taken off, knows where to hide merchandise until the end of the day, or brazen enough to have a friend with a truck in the back of the store and literally take boxes of merchandise out and put them in the truck and drive out with them.
Just through the loading dock?
Just through the loading dock.
Some stores report that half of all shoplifting is actually done by the staff. So you do sympathize with companies and the theft problem?
Yeah, but this test is not an insight into a person's psyche, what they're going to do or what they're not going to do.
Okay, just a minute.
Trina wonders whether she was actually too honest on the honesty test. Because if you admit to every single dishonest act or impulse you've ever had, you'll come across as being dishonest, even though admitting it was a supreme act of honesty. That's the conundrum, and it's also why many honest people fail.
Are you guys going to do groceries with me later?
Sobeys is one of thousands of companies in North America that use these tests. They decline to comment on Trina's case or why they use the honesty test. Psychological profiling is nothing new. At the turn of the century, new immigrants to the U.S. were tested and rejected on the basis of their individual worth. Much of the testing was done by eugenicists back then, who believed in selective breeding to improve mankind. The military used psychological tests, too, to classify its soldiers. The smartest ones became officers. Industry saw the benefits of testing, especially after 1988, when the lie detector was banned from the workplace in the U.S. It's also banned in Ontario and New Brunswick. The honesty test is a perfect replacement, cheap and legal. The most popular ones come out of Chicago, the Stanton Survey and the Reid Report. That's the test Trina took. It boasts an 85% success rate at catching thieves. The company wouldn't comment on Trina's case, but referred us to William Harris, head of the Test Publishers Association of North America.
We are screening out individuals who, from a probable or from a probabilistic standpoint, or from a likelihood or a chance vantage point, reflect certain behaviors of people that in the past have been involved in theft. We don't know for sure that this individual is going to steal, just like we don't know that the person who we're saying is going to be very honest is going to be free of theft.
What do you know then?
What we do know is that this person has been predicted, and keeping in mind that everything that we do is based on statistics, which is a science of uncertainty. It's not a science of exactness.
Critics say that's putting it mildly, that for every thief that's caught, 3 to 5 honest people are lumped in too. They're called false positives, and Trina's convinced she's one of them. Did you feel that you had been discriminated against?
Yes.
On the basis of what?
Of the way I was brought up. I was brought up not to lie, that if it was something that I had done wrong, then if I fessed up right away, if I told the truth, Mom and Dad were going to go easier on me. And I do that with my own kids.
Okay. Trina's taken her case to the Nova Scotia Human Rights Commission, but her chances of proving discrimination are slim. She's not part of a group, say a religion or sex, that's systematically being denied their rights. Pam Rubin is a human rights lawyer who co-authored a study on honesty testing in Canada. She says she was shocked by some of the questions on the tests.
Not only as a lawyer, but just as your average person, looking at the list of questions, I found myself chuckling. Mm-hmm. Do you blush? Do you make your bed in the morning? Do you attend serious or do you attend lectures on serious topics? I did find it a bit amusing and shocking, actually, that decisions are being made about people's livelihoods on the basis of these questions.
And did it strike you, did it jump out at you what exactly was being violated, if anything, in terms of one's rights as an individual?
Well, I think the problem is, in terms of the rights framework in Canada, there is not a lot of protection against this kind of intrusive, offensive questioning.
But William Harris defends the tests because he says they do catch the dishonest ones.
There have been studies that have looked at brand new stores of same size, same socioeconomic status within the community, same number of employees, and have done a very controlled type of research and have found from that experiment that the store that was actually using the product had the lowest shrinkage.
But how do you know that the reduction in theft is due to the integrity testing? You don't really know that, do you?
No, you don't know that. You don't know that.
It's just a correlation.
Well,
So
it's an indirect relationship, yeah.
Because follow-up studies are difficult and expensive, most are done by the test publishers themselves. So no independent body is testing the tests. Human rights lawyer Pam Rubin has a problem with that.
Well, it's sort of like the tobacco industry testing for smoking and health problems. That is, when you have the company that's trying to sell a product also checking that product's validity, well, common sense tells you that it becomes a bit dubious.
And sometimes you don't even know what these tests are asking. Those are the veiled questions, ones that try to find characteristics that are associated with dishonesty, like taking risks, driving fast cars, and littering. If you're prone to any of those, it'll count against you. But I drive cars fast. I'm not going to steal. I guess some of these linkages, I think critics have problems with.
But the problems that proponents have with critics is that they tend to look at the individual item. We look at the scale score. I mean, critics micromanage it right down to the individual item, which is not the right place because the item itself is not the predictive component. It's a subset of a larger scale that forms our prediction.
In other words, all the answers combined form the true picture. But how are the results interpreted? I took a test called a dependability survey, of which honesty was just a part. I scored just 69% on the honesty section. If the company I was applying to used that as the sole criterion, I'd be out of a job. But companies aren't supposed to do that. These tests are meant to be used along with interviews and checking job references, not instead of. Trouble is, there's nothing preventing companies from using these tests in any way they please. That's what worries Marvin Simner, a psychologist at the University of Western Ontario. He's written guidelines for the Canadian Psychological Association that the testing industry is supposed to follow. They recommend that only qualified personnel interpret the results, and that an independent body study the validity of each test. But he admits the guidelines are voluntary and don't have enough teeth.
The only thing that could be done is if there was some degree of legislation that actually controlled this process, but right now there isn't.
Do you think there should be?
I think there should be because we are such a test-dominated society, and the tests are made too freely available to too many people who make decisions on the basis of test scores without necessarily having the proper background or the proper knowledge. And these decisions can be very, very detrimental.
The impact that I had when I got the phone call saying I didn't meet the hiring requirements because of this written part. At first I was very upset. I sat down and I cried. I was very upset.
Trina's now found work in a local pizzeria. No test required. In a way, she's fortunate. At least she knows that flunking the test cost her the job at Sobeys. Most applicants never find that out. All they know is they never did get that call back for a second interview.
It is just so not right. It's so unfair to just your average Joe that wants to go out and get a job and help support their family. It's so unfair.
2 American states would agree with her. Massachusetts has banned honesty tests, and Rhode Island has limited their use. Great Britain requires that all testers be qualified and all tests subject to independent review. But for the time being in Canada, they're totally unregulated. So what do you do if you face an honesty test? Industry insiders say don't be afraid to exaggerate a little. The tests are designed under the assumption that you'll paint a rosy picture of yourself. So to stay ahead of the pack, embellish. But don't go too far, because if you come across as a Pollyanna, the tests are designed to catch obvious liars, too. If all this sounds incredibly strategic, it is. Nobody said being honest was easy.